Welcome to a deep dive into the fascinating world of decision making. Today, we're going to be exploring some excerpts from Annie Duke's How to Decide. She's a former poker pro with a PhD in cognitive science. So she brings a really unique perspective to this topic.
What's really cool about her approach is that she kind of blends this cutting edge research with these like real world examples, so
Yeah.
it makes it super easy to apply these concepts to your own life.
Yeah, I think that's what I really liked
Yeah.
about the book. It's like very accessible, very relatable. So our mission today is to kind of equip you with some of the mental models and practical tools that can help you make better decisions, whether you're choosing a career path. We're just trying to figure out what to have for dinner tonight.
Absolutely. And one of the first things Duke tackles is this idea of resulting. It's this sneaky tendency we have to judge our decisions based solely on the outcome.
Ooh, resulting.
Yeah.
I think I'm guilty of that all the time. Like, remember that time I convinced you to invest in that new cryptocurrency?
Oh, yeah. And when it crashed, you blamed it on everything but your initial decision to buy in. It's just so easy to forget all the factors that were at play at the time.
Oh, yeah, for sure, for sure. Okay, so how do we avoid falling into the resulting trap? It feels like it's hardwired into our brains to focus on the outcome.
Well, I think awareness is the first step. Duke encourages us to dissect our past decisions, focusing on the process rather than just the result. So instead of just saying, oh, buying that stock was a terrible decision, you might ask yourself, did I research the company thoroughly? Did I consider the risks?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's like a post-game analysis for our decisions. But what about hindsight bias? Isn't that another way we distort our past decisions?
Absolutely. It's that classic I knew it all along phenomenon. After something happens, it's easy to look back and think, oh, that was inevitable.
Totally. But isn't there some value in reflecting on past decisions?
Hmm?
Like, how can we learn without looking back?
The key is to be honest with ourselves. Duke Owl uses the 2016 U.S. presidential election as an example. After the results, a lot of experts claim that Hillary Clinton's campaign made all these obvious blunders. But, if you look at the pre-election analysis, very few people were predicting those issues. So knowing the outcome really colors our perception of the
So we
past.
need to be really careful not to rewrite history in our minds.
Exactly. And this leads to what Duke calls the paradox of experience. We need experience to learn and to make better decisions. But if we're distorting those experiences through resulting in hindsight bias, we're not actually learning the right lessons.
Right, so it's like we're stuck in this loop of making the same mistakes over and over again because we're not accurately assessing our past choices.
Yeah, exactly. Duke uses this analogy of a decision tree to illustrate this. So imagine each branch representing a possible outcome. At the time you made the decision, the thicker the branch, the more likely that outcome was.
Okay, so when we're making a decision, we need to be mindful of all the potential paths we could have taken,
Yeah.
not just the one that actually happened.
Precisely. Reconstruct that full tree, including the paths that didn't materialize. Ask yourself, what if I had taken that other job? What if I hadn't invested in that stock?
I like that. That sounds like a really useful exercise for any decision,
Yeah.
big or small. It kind of forces you to acknowledge that luck plays a role
Hmm.
and that a bad outcome doesn't always mean you made a bad decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And another important point that Duke makes is the power of precision. We often use these vague terms like likely or possible when we're talking about probabilities, but these words can mean wildly different things to different people.
Oh, I've definitely experienced that. Like, I might say something is possible, meaning it has a 10% chance of happening, but someone else might interpret that as like a 50% chance. No wonder we have so much miscommunication.
Exactly. Duke recommends using percentages instead of this vague language. So instead of telling your boss, there's a chance this project will be delayed, you could say, I estimate a 30% chance of delays. This forces you to think more critically about the likelihood of different outcomes.
And it makes you sound way more confident and data-driven.
Absolutely. Duke also introduces a tool called the shock test to help refine your estimates. So imagine you're estimating how long it will take you to finish a project.
Okay, got it. I'm picturing my current to-do list.
Now, set a range where you'd be pretty shocked if the actual time fell outside of it. So this helps you be more realistic in your predictions.
That's a great tip. It forces you to think about both the best case and the worst case scenarios. So far, we've covered avoiding resulting in hindsight bias, reconstructing decision trees, and being more precise with probabilities. What's next?
Well, next, Duke tackles the idea of the inside view versus the outside view.
Ooh, those sound intriguing. What's the difference?
So the inside view is a personal, subjective perspective, often clouded by emotions and biases. It's like that classic example of asking a newlywed couple, what are the chances of you getting divorced?
Yeah.
They'll likely give you a much lower estimate than the actual divorce rate, right?
Because they're in love, they're looking at the situation through rose-colored glasses.
Exactly. That's the inside view in action. On the other hand, the outside view considers objective facts and base rates. It's about looking at how often things happen in similar situations, regardless of your personal feelings.
Okay, so to make smarter decisions, we need to find a way to balance the inside view with the outside view.
Absolutely. Acknowledge your personal perspective, but then step back and look for those objective facts and data to ground yourself in reality.
Yeah, this is making me realize how often I let my emotions cloud my judgment, especially when it comes to big decisions.
Mm.
But isn't there a danger in overthinking things? Like sometimes you just got to go with your gut, right?
Duke addresses that too. She talks about a concept called free rolling.
Okay, free rolling. That sounds exciting. Tell me more.
So it's about those situations where the downside is minimal and the upside potential is high. Like think about trying to decide between two equally appealing lunch options.
Oh, I know that feeling. Sometimes I spend way too much time agonizing over what to eat for lunch.
Right, so in those cases, Duke says don't overthink it, just pick one and enjoy your lunch. The cost of choosing the wrong lunch is pretty low, and you still get to eat delicious food.
That's such a freeing perspective. It takes the pressure off those everyday decisions.
Yeah.
But what about the big decisions? Like choosing a career path or buying a house? Those feel way more complicated.
Right. For those bigger decisions, Duke suggests a strategy called decision stacking. It's about breaking down those overwhelming choices into smaller, more manageable decisions.
Okay, so instead of trying to figure out my entire career trajectory in one go, I could start by identifying a few fields I'm interested in
Hmm.
and taking some online courses to learn more about them.
Exactly. Or if you're thinking about buying a house in a new neighborhood, you could start by renting in that area for a few months to see if you actually like living there.
It's like a try before you buy approach to decision making. I love that. But even with those smaller decisions, I sometimes get stuck in analysis paralysis. How do I know when I've gathered enough information to make a good choice?
Duke has some great advice for that too. She suggests asking yourself two key questions. First, what information could I discover that would make me change my mind? And second, is that information realistically available?
So if I've done a reasonable amount of research and I can't think of any new information that would drastically change my decision, then it's probably time to just make a choice.
Precisely. Sometimes we get so caught up in gathering information that we lose sight of the bigger picture. It's about finding that balance between being informed and being decisive.
This is making me realize how much of decision-making is about being proactive and strategic. But even with the best plans, things don't always go our way. How do we deal with those inevitable setbacks and disappointments?
Well, Duke talks about the importance of understanding our emotional reactions to bad outcomes. Have you ever noticed that you tend to make worse decisions when you're feeling stressed or upset?
Oh, absolutely. Like if I have a bad day at work, I'm way more likely to make impulsive decisions, like ordering takeout instead of cooking a healthy meal, or staying up late watching TV instead of getting enough sleep.
Right. Duke calls this tilt. It's like when a pinball machine gets tilted and the ball goes crazy. When we're tilted, our emotions are clouding our judgment, and we're not thinking clearly.
So how do we avoid getting tilted and making those emotionally driven decisions? It feels like sometimes our emotions just take over.
Well, the first step is recognizing your personal tilt signals. Do you get irritable? Do you start making excuses? Do you withdraw from others? Once you know your patterns, you can start to develop strategies for managing those emotions.
So it's about creating a pause between the emotion and the reaction, like taking a few deep breaths before making a decision when I'm feeling stressed.
Exactly. Duke recommends things like taking a break, talking to a trusted friend, or practicing mindfulness techniques. Anything that helps you calm down and regain your composure.
It's so interesting to think about how much our emotional state can influence our decision making. But even when we're feeling calm and collected, there's always that little voice of doubt, right? Like, what if I make the wrong choice?
Duke has a really fun and thought-provoking exercise for addressing that fear. It's called the Dr. Evil game.
Okay, Dr. Evil game. That sounds intriguing. And a little mischievous. What is it?
So imagine that Dr. Evil, the villain from the Austin Powers movies, has taken control of your brain and is determined to make you fail at achieving a particular goal.
Oh, I love this already. So I have to think like a supervillain who's trying to sabotage my own success.
Exactly. The challenge is to come up with all the subtle and justifiable ways Dr. Evil would tempt you to make bad decisions.
So if my goal was to save more money, Dr. Evil might convince me to buy a daily latte or a new pair of shoes, justifying these purchases as treats or rewards.
You got it. Or if your goal was to eat healthier, he might persuade you to make exceptions for special occasions that gradually become the rule rather than the exception.
That's so clever. It's about exposing those sneaky patterns of self-sabotage that we might not even be aware of.
Yeah, the Dr. Evil game is a lighthearted way to address a serious issue. By anticipating those temptations, you can develop strategies to resist them.
I'm definitely going to try this. It sounds like a fun way to outsmart my inner saboteur. But even with all the tools and strategies we've discussed, there's still that element of uncertainty in decision-making, right? We can't predict the future.
That's where hedging comes in. It's about acknowledging that we can't control everything, and sometimes things just don't go our way.
So it's about creating backup plans
Mm.
or taking actions to minimize the negative impact. If things don't go according to plan,
Exactly. Like if you're planning a big outdoor event, you might want to rent a tent in case it rains, even if the forecast looks good. Or if you're applying for a new job, you might continue networking and exploring other opportunities, even if you feel confident about getting that one particular job.
it's like creating a safety net for yourself. I'm starting to see how all these concepts work together. But there's one thing I'm still wrestling with. How do I know when to trust my gut instincts versus relying on logic and data?
That's a great question, and it's something a lot of people struggle with. Duke talks about the importance of understanding the role of intuition in decision making.
Because I've always heard that you should trust your gut, but sometimes my gut leads me astray.
Right. Well, intuition isn't some magical sixth sense. It's actually based on your past experiences and accumulated knowledge. Think of it as your subconscious mind processing information and drawing conclusions, even if you're not consciously aware of it.
Okay, so it's like our brain is constantly running simulations in the background based on our past experiences.
Exactly, and that's why sometimes our gut feelings can be incredibly accurate. Like, if you've been a doctor for 20 years, you might have a gut feeling about a patient's diagnosis, even if you can't immediately explain why.
That makes sense. But then why do our gut instincts sometimes lead us astray?
Well, because our intuition can also be influenced by our biases and emotional baggage. If we've had a negative experience in the past, it can color our perceptions and lead us to make decisions based on fear or avoidance rather than logic.
So it's about recognizing that our intuition is a valuable tool, but not infallible. We need to be mindful of its limitations.
Precisely. Duke suggests using a combination of intuition and analysis when making decisions. Listen to your gut, but also take the time to step back and critically evaluate the situation. It's like a dance between the head and the heart.
I love that analogy. So it's not about choosing one over the other. It's about finding that balance between the rational and the intuitive. This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I've learned so much, and I'm excited to put these tools into practice in my own life.
That's great to hear. And remember, good decision making isn't about being perfect. It's about being intentional and continuously learning and improving.
It's a journey, not a destination. Speaking of journeys, this deep dive has been incredibly valuable. But before we wrap things up, I'd love to offer our listeners a final challenge.
Oh, I like that. I'm always up for a good challenge.
So over the next week, I challenge you, dear listener, to choose one decision you're facing, big or small, and apply at least 3 of the tools or strategies we've discussed today.
Ooh, that's a great challenge. It could be something as simple as like using the happiness test to decide how much time you want to spend on a decision, or something a little bit more involved like conducting a pre-mortem or playing the Dr. Evil game.
Exactly. It's all about taking these concepts out of the theoretical realm and putting them into practice in your own life.
I have a feeling we're going to hear some amazing stories about how these tools have helped people make better decisions and achieve their goals.
Me too. I can't wait to hear about it. Now, before we wrap up, I thought it'd be helpful to do a quick recap of the key takeaways from Duke's book. We've covered a lot of ground today, and it's always good to have a cheat sheet, right?
Absolutely. A decision-making toolkit
Yeah.
to take with you.
Exactly. So let's distill it down to 10 key points.
Oh, yeah, I'm ready.
Hit me with those decision-making nuggets of wisdom.
Okay, number 1. Remember the concept of resulting. Don't judge decisions solely by their outcomes. Instead, focus on the process that you use to make the decision.
Got it. Process over outcome. What's next?
Number 2, be aware of hindsight bias. The past always seems more predictable than it was. Don't fall into the trap of, I knew it all along, thinking.
Right. Hindsight is 20/20, but it can really distort our learning. What's number 3?
Number 3, acknowledge the paradox of experience. Individual experiences can hinder our ability to learn, especially if we're not carefully analyzing them.
That's so counterintuitive. But it makes sense when you think about it. We need to be mindful of how our biases can shape our perceptions of past events. Okay, what's next?
Number 4, precision matters. Use percentages instead of vague terms like likely or possible when you're estimating probabilities.
Right. Percentages over vagueness. It just forces clarity and better communication. What's number 5?
Number 5, balance your inside view with the outside view. Consider objective facts and base rates, in addition to your own personal perspective.
Got it. Don't just rely on your gut feelings. Look for the data. What's number 6?
Number 6, use the happiness test to determine how much time and energy a decision deserves. Ask yourself, will this matter to me in a week, a month, a year? If not, speed things up.
Right. Don't overthink the small stuff. What's number 7?
Number 7, look for free rolling opportunities. When the downside is minimal, make a decision and move on.
Love it. Embrace those low-risk, high-reward situations. What's number 8?
Number 8, utilize the pre-mortem exercise to uncover potential risks and plan for contingencies.
Got it. Imagine your goal failing and then figure out why. It's about preparation, not pessimism. Okay, what's number 9?
Number 9, practice good decision hygiene. Quarantine your own opinion when you're seeking feedback from others so you don't contaminate their thinking.
Right. Ask for opinions before sharing your own. That way you get unbiased feedback. And what's number 10?
And number 10, create accountability checklists to ensure that you're providing all the necessary information when you're asking for advice.
Oh, this is like a decision-making toolkit in 10 easy steps.
It's a great starting point. And remember, the key is to keep practicing and refining your approach to decision-making. It's a lifelong journey.
Absolutely. This has been such a fascinating deep dive into the art and science of decision-making. I feel like I've learned so much, and I'm excited to put these tools into practice in my own life.
Me too. And remember, every decision, big or small, is an opportunity to learn and grow.
That's a great reminder. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Annie Duke's How to Decide. Until next time, happy deciding.
I love that. A decision-making challenge for our listeners.
Yes, I'm excited to hear how it goes for everyone. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Annie Duke's How to Decide. It's been an amazing conversation, and I feel like we've just scratched the surface of this topic.
Yeah, there's so much more to explore.
Definitely. But before we say goodbye, I think it would be helpful to leave our listeners with a final thought.
I like it.
What's the one piece of advice from the book that you think everyone should take to heart?
That's a tough one. There are so many great insights.
I know, right?
But I think the most important takeaway is that good decision-making is a skill. It's something that you can learn and improve over time.
Absolutely. It's not about being perfect. It's about being intentional and continuously learning.
Exactly. So don't be afraid to experiment. Try out different tools and strategies and see what works best for you.
And remember, every decision you make is an opportunity to learn and grow.
That's a great way to put it.
So embrace those opportunities and keep practicing the art of making better decisions. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.